So you only have control over half of the equation. You have control over how much money you're making, your operating income, but you don't have control over the comps. So you could be running the same type of building, same condition, same location, but because you're making more money, because you're operating it more efficiently, it will actually be worth more.
Move over, baby boomers. It's time for Gen XYZ. It's time to stop waiting on the world to change. It's time to be the change. It's time to stop thinking about how your life can be better. It's time to start taking action, massive action to improve your life. Join Zach Winter and Mark Adair Rios every week as we learn how others had the grit, determination, and conviction to 10x their lives, and as we explore ways that can help you 10x your life. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of 10x for Gen XYZ. My name is Mark Adair Rios.
And I'm Zach Winter.
And today we have a special guest. We got Emma Powell from Highrise Group. She is a multifamily syndicator and passive investor. And we're very happy to sit down with her and talk to her today about what she's got going on. Hey, Emma.
Hey, Emma. Thanks for having me.
How are you?
A Gen Xer.
I love it.
Perfect.
I love it. Yeah, we actually, that's an interesting thing because, we're inclusive of all groups. We don't want anybody to think that we're leaving out the baby boomers, but it just didn't. It wasn't as catchy.
Yeah.
So, but
we boomer is your podcast title.
So yeah, great. So I'm really happy to have you on. We've been trying to kind of get this thing going. I know we had a little false start a couple of weeks ago, but we're glad to have you here today. So you and your husband, you do multifamily investing, correct? And are you mostly on the general partnership side? Are you guys operators, or did you do any passive investing as well?
I would say my husband's more in the cheerleading and support staff role. So we can talk more about that.
So you're running stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely my business, and his input is such to make sure that I run it like a business instead of like sometimes you get a little too high up and not detail oriented enough, and he's more of an operator personality, and so it drives him crazy when I'm not organized or I don't have my numbers together, my books kept. So he's definitely a huge influence that way. But as far as working in the business, he helps me out here and there, but I wouldn't say that we're partners in that sense. Right. We probably will be after he retires. That's one of the things we're working on, getting him kind of slowly trained up by osmosis so that he can step in and really start to scale once he feels secure enough to quit his W-2.
Cool. So what does he do? What does he do for
that's the funny thing. His job title, he's in developer operations, which is an IT position where they basically help the developers get the product or the software released. And his job is specifically continuous integration, which basically means like automated deployment. So I think he would be fantastic in my real estate business because he's all about thinking about how to automate things, thinking how to put things into packets and get them sent off down the river. And for the type of business that I run, which is highly a marketing based business, you're raising capital, looking for deals. You're always marketing for deals or marketing for dollars, as Lance Edwards says. He would be really, really good at just having that system on rails. So I'm excited to have him come join the business, but we're working on some things to help him feel a little bit more stable and secure. Yeah. He's definitely, he introduces himself as my wife, Troy.
Right.
Yeah. Usually it's the woman. I mean, if we're going to get into gender roles here, usually it's the woman who is a little more security minded and wanting like regular paychecks coming in and just that knowledge that everything is going to get paid on time and everybody knows where their next meal is coming from. And the entrepreneur tends to be more like, we'll figure it out as we go along. Right. And in our relationship, that's definitely me. Neither of one of us were raised in an entrepreneurial family, although my mom did have a lot of little cottage businesses that she ran. I don't know where it came from. I don't know why exactly I do this or I'm like this, but I'm like, we got enough money in the bank. Let's move to Europe. Costa Rica's looking good this time of year. So I'm definitely much more of a risk taker, much more of an adventurer. I get really bored easily, and just I'm always moving.
So how did I was just going to ask, how did you find real estate? Did you start off in single family and kind of move into multifamily, or did you really kind of jump in with the multifamily kind of stuff?
I think we started out with commercial aspirations, but we ended up doing some single family stuff first, because when you're out there looking for something, I'm still open to opportunities that drop in my lap. So and I think this goes back again to my husband. When we moved from Austin to Salt Lake about 4 years ago, he grew up in Idaho. We didn't know anything about Utah. Hadn't spent a lot of time here, didn't really know anybody here, but we were up in his hometown in Idaho, which is near Idaho Falls, which during COVID 2020 was the number one fastest growing city in the country, which like Idaho Falls. I was super shocked when I saw that. And so in 2018, we had really identified that corridor through Southeast Idaho as a place we'd like to invest, because when he was growing up, it was a small college town, and these small apartment buildings, like 10 units, 20 units, things like that. They have some larger ones, but he had a lot of neighbors that owned these buildings. And so even when we first got married, we've been married, just had our 25th anniversary. We would look at that and think, oh yeah, someday we're going to do that as our retirement project. So it was always something that we knew real people did, like normal people. I think we have a tendency to see people who own commercial real estate or doing some of these large scale things as being truly exceptional. And I don't have anybody in my network like that, but we realize we do have people in our network like that. They weren't necessarily going to help us by mentoring us or giving us money, but sometimes you just have to have the example. So we started out with those commercial aspirations, but we were just looking, and we ended up with some residential stuff along the way. And I'm actually glad that we did, because even though managing them can kind of be a little bit of a headache, they're my best cash flowing assets. And as we're getting ready to retire, I realize the cash flow that we're earning off those little ones, they're just such quick turnover. You can buy it, have it renovated, have someone in there 2 months later, and you're cash flowing. Yeah. It takes a lot longer to stabilize commercial properties, and it takes them a lot longer to start cash flowing. So the way that we're doing that is stacking them up. So buy one or two every year, and eventually we'll start, but it takes a few years to get down the runway.
Yeah.
How are you dealing with the property management at these smaller properties?
I self-manage those for one reason. Well, I guess two reasons. I'm a cheapskate, and my singles and my little, my duplex, triplex, they're all local to me. Mm-hmm. And I look at them, and when I bought them, I just didn't really feel like they could support a property manager comfortably. Yeah. They could have, but I just wanted the money. I want to keep the money. And so the other reason that I self-manage is for IRS purposes. He's a W-2 employee, and I need to be a real estate professional so that my depreciation or my passive losses can offset his active income. I have hardly any active income, just a little bit, but all of his is active. And if I'm a real estate professional, then I can offset that. And self-managing, I have to be significantly involved in the management of the source of the passive income. It's not just 750 hours a year. And I think this is something that's highly misunderstood. And CPAs sometimes even say, oh, it's fine. You're a realtor, mortgage broker. You spend 750. Well, you're a real estate professional. No, you have to be significantly involved in the management. So I choose to self-manage my small properties. And I think with the IT tools and automation tools that are available now, kind of going back to that history, it's much, much simpler to self-manage these than it ever has been before with electronics and IT and automation. And so we have managers in our larger properties, but even that is getting to the point where you could probably make do with an automated approach and some IT tools and subscription services that you might not even need property managers on some of the smaller, like
interesting
10, 20, 30 unit buildings.
Right. That's very interesting. And go ahead, Zach.
I was just going to say there's also probably a pretty big benefit in self-managing the smaller units in terms of the quality of the property management company. If you were to farm it out to a third-party management company. I mean, we've noticed significant differences between the quality of a management company that's used to managing 100 plus units versus managing single-family homes, 2 to 4 units.
Yeah.
And then also the amount that they take, right? I mean, if you're looking at a single-family home, they might want 8-10% of the gross rental income versus if you're dealing with a 100 plus unit, it's a different fee structure. It's maybe 3% plus some on-site salaries.
Yeah. I think that if you have That's why single family is just not as scalable. It's because you're taking 10% off of your entire portfolio. So if you have even 100 single family houses, you'll still be a pretty wealthy person with some good cash flow. But that's a huge chunk of that gross revenue that's going towards property management expenses. Whereas on the larger properties, you're paying 3, 5, maybe 6 or 7 for the mid-range stuff. And maybe some payroll if you have a really large property. But our mid-size stuff, usually we use the property managers, maintenance crews and things like that. And sometimes you can negotiate a flat fee for that, like a monthly fee to have that covered. So there are ways to really save a lot of money on your property management and negotiate with your property manager. But the best way is obviously to self-manage. I don't even think I'm very good at it. Like I said, I'm not detail-oriented. I'm not particularly organized, but I'm still doing a better job than your average run-of-the-mill property manager.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Yeah, thinking about that scaling part of it, there's this big movement right now where people are doing these build to rent,
Right.
the build to rent movement. And, to your point, onesies, twosies aren't going to really cut it if you really want to exponentially grow, right? If you want to 10x your portfolio, you have to do something that streamlines and makes more efficient the operations, but also allows you to, afford either third-party management or allow yourself to bring some people on and you build kind of, vertically integrate, right? You create a management company inside your own company. And so like even the BTR stuff, they're bundling together 10, 15, 20 single family homes, but either they're managing in bulk like that, and they're doing the same thing like we do with our multifamily properties where you have 100 units of apartments with under one roof. Well, maybe you got 100 houses that you're achieving the same economies of scale as well, right?
Yeah, and I think economies of scale is a real buzzword in the commercial real estate space. And a lot of times people don't understand what it means. We think it's like Walmart who can buy bulk product, but it affects every part of the business, from the maintenance expenses to the management expenses. It's just having everything not only bundled in one location, but having the continuity from unit to unit to unit, because it's the same faucet, it's the same washer, it's the same parts. So you're like, my handyman for my single families, he'll come out, he'll look at it, he'll go to Home Depot, he'll call me. It's just very different because everything is like a creative endeavor. It's like he's coming at it from a problem solving perspective, whereas my maintenance guys on my multi-units, they are just there day in, day out, just doing it. They know exactly what needs to be done. They've done it 100 times before, and having that repetitiveness, it really makes it more efficient. And occasionally they'll get a challenge that can keep them engaged creatively, but for the most part, we try and keep it fairly, what's the word? The consistency between units helps a lot with saving costs.
Yeah, absolutely. The other big difference between owning a bunch of single family homes and owning larger multifamily is valuation and forced depreciation. So I started out buying single family homes as rentals, and what you realize is you can't force the appreciation. When you buy a home, the valuation is based off of the home down the street and the home down the block. It's based off of the comps, versus when we buy apartment buildings, and I'm sure you do this too, you're looking at a value add scenario where, can I go in there, upgrade the common areas, upgrade the units, and then charge more for a nicer apartment building? And then the valuation is based off of the increased NOI.
That's a really, really good point, actually, Zach. Like I actually had never thought of what you're talking about there, but it makes complete sense in terms of that.
And it definitely cuts both ways. I agree with what you're saying, and at the same time, I see in a single family space how using those comps, you're going to look at the pictures and you're going to decide, like, do they have an extra garage? Like, what kinds of improvements are you going to force so you can match the comps, or you can start to be in line with some of the nicer comps that are being evaluated higher. So you do have some control there. I would say definitely have more control in the commercial space, specifically multifamily, because that's what I have experience in. But it still is kind of comps driven, because you're going to have rental comps that you're going to be looking at, like do they have granite or do they have laminate? Do they have tile or they have LVP? And so you're spending some time shopping comps, looking at photos, going and doing site visits, secret shopping your comps so that kind of what your upper limit is and what you can charge for rent. So comps in that sense. And the other thing that I think I just posted about this on my group the other day about cap rates and how people latch on to cap rates as a way of evaluating.
Yeah, I saw that post there. Yeah.
Highly incomplete, but at the same time, it's highly comps driven because if an area cap rate for a similar size, similar condition, similar location, and it sells, they're going to look at how much did that building make and then how much did it sell for, and they're going to use those to derive the cap rate, and then they're going to stick that same cap rate on your property. So you only have control over half of the equation. You have control over how much money you're making, your operating income, but you don't have control over the comps. So you could be running the same type of building, same condition, same location, but because you're making more money, because you're operating it more efficiently, it will actually be worth more. So you do have control, but it's not complete control. It still is highly based on comps.
We actually, Zach and I have this conversation quite a bit about this cap rate, stuff. But I think also because I saw your post on LinkedIn about the cap rates, and it actually brought up something to me, which is it seems that a lot of people lose sight of the fact that the cap rate is actually supposed to be a reflection of return that you should be getting based on some measure of risk and risk-free rate and all that stuff. Like that's the core essence. It isn't just this number
for it. And none of us are paying cash for these. So how useful is it really?
Right. But and there's a lot of school, and I actually tend to believe, because I've thought about this too, at a certain point, and this is what I've been taught too, that a real cap rate is really a stabilized number too. And so for value add deals, when you have some room to go to a stabilized state, you shouldn't be using a cap rate. You should be using yield on cost to check and see what your potential returns are going to be. That's the key, right? And then when it gets stabilized, your returns are kind of based on that quote unquote cap rate. But that's interesting that, because people just throw it out around like it's a multiplier, put a 3 multiple on the NOI and, it's like, no, man, it's very interesting.
Yeah. And I think that it can be deceptive, because I think of the cap rate like the 1% rule. It's a good starting point and see if you want to dive deeper into something. But yet at the same time, you might throw away a good deal because of it. So when I'm early screening a deal, I tend to have a much wider funnel because I don't want to throw away good deals because my initial screening criteria is too tight. So the funnel tightens down pretty quickly, but I let a lot of deals into the top end of the funnel, which is part of the reason I'm so slow getting them through, is because it's too many. I'm looking at too many that don't deserve to be looked at. And that was a huge factor in me being able to scale so scaling from single family to multifamily is great, but then scaling from multifamily to a larger portfolio or business is another matter entirely. And so I found that was a real bottleneck for me, because I don't want to throw away deals too early, but at the same time, you just can't look at so many, or you just slow down.
That's so one of the things that we do is we look at, we have certain criteria for neighborhood demographics and things like that. And so that's very easy for us to go through and screen before we start underwriting. So we'll go and look and see, do the schools meet our requirements? Does the median household income meet our minimum requirements? Does the per capita income meet our requirement? What about unemployment? So we have a list of, like 20 different metrics we look through. And if it doesn't meet that, it's a lot easier for us to kill the deal before we start spending the time to underwrite it.
Kind of get into the nitty gritty. Yeah.
And well, I was just going to add one of the other reasons that we realized pretty early on too, was that because we have investors and, they're a stakeholder in our business, we pretty much always end up backing into some sort of net return for them, right? Like when all said and done and all the information's in the model, beyond the data points that Zach said, if we're looking at a deal hard, in the end, we're adjusting the purchase price in order to back into that return that we think is going to benefit them and also us, and that's a kind of a reverse, discounted cash flow, if you want to, call that on a net return basis. And so none of that involves a cap rate, except that once we find that, then we start looking at, okay, well, what are we buying? What cap rate are we buying? And start going, okay, well, it's a value add, so the cap rate doesn't really matter. What's the yield on cost? We start looking at that stuff, or what's the price per unit? Oh my God, we're buying at 175,000 a unit, and we have to sell it 225 to get this return. Is that going to happen in 2 years? That kind of stuff, right?
Well, that's one of the nice things about my investing club, is because I feel like bringing a bunch of people together every week who have diverse goals, diverse backgrounds, and we're all talking about investing in these deals together is that we are able to talk about the ratios or the metrics that make sense for us and that help us to meet our goals. And it may be different than somebody else's, but they are pointing things out that maybe I hadn't ever considered, because maybe I'm trying to invest for cash flow and they're trying to invest for net worth growth, or they're more concerned about certain things than I might be. And I'm learning a lot, theoretically leading the group, right? But there are people in the club that know a lot more about evaluating or vetting a deal, or the financial underwriting or the market underwriting than I do. And the other benefit of it is I know I have to show up every week. And if I don't feel like working on deals, because I don't really like underwriting or screening, they're there and they're expecting me. And I know I'm at least going to get a good solid hour of work in and looking at deals, whether I wanted to be a limited partner, I wanted to try and co-GP something. And sometimes they're not under contract. We could actually offer on them if we wanted to. It forces me to actually go look at some of these things that might be a little bit boring, a little bit much. I know most people don't like this stuff. I think you have to learn it. There's no way around it. Like, pull on your big boy pants and just do it. But at the same time, it's like having a personal trainer at the gym. I know my club is going to be there and I better show up because we're going to get some work done.
Talk to me about this club. That's really interesting, because I think that, we probably have a portion of listeners who are just starting out. They're listening to these types of podcasts. And even though we have a certain amount of real estate people, just trying to find ways to grow. And it's very interesting that I've heard of these clubs before. I've never been a member of them, but I've also been a member of masterminds and other types of things. I'm kind of guru driven. So just talk to me a little bit about how, what was the impetus to start this type of club? And it sounds like it's helped you a lot. And I'm just wondering if you kind of recommend it for some of the people out there trying to kind of figure all of this stuff out, and they don't want to spend
$30,000 on it. That was a big impetus, actually. So just knew too many people who had done that, and 3 years later they've not even done their first deal yet, despite looking. There's just a lot that goes into it. It's a super steep learning curve, and even if you can find a good deal, can you run it? Can you get it funded? Can you get the loan? There are just so many moving pieces that it can be really, really a frustrating game. And so I find that the term club is thrown around a lot by the gurus, because you'll get onto their website and they'll be like, join the club. Well, really all it is it's an investor list that you get on to be notified of when they need money for you to be a limited partner. It is not a club. They do not meet. They do not go over deals together. They're not learning together. There's no networking. They're not going to do a deal with you, no matter what they say when you sign up for their program, unless you bring them a really good one. And they see a lot of deals. So the chances that yours as a beginner is going to be good is pretty slim. So it's not a club. What I'm talking about is the true use of the word club as the SEC defines an investing club. So basically we get together. At that point, it's just a meetup. People don't have to invest in it in the deal if they don't want to, but we look at deals pretty much every week. We'll do first level, second level, third level. We just closed our first club pool deal in January. And I was a 506B, so I wasn't able to talk about it or advertise it. And I'm still being real quiet about it. I won't talk about it a whole lot. But our second one is a 506C. And for people who are familiar with that, it means it's for accredited investors only, but because of that, I can talk about all I want and advertise it. So we get these deals into the club. We crunch them every single week. And if people like them, we'll pool our capital and then we'll go negotiate for better terms with the operators, because it's just like a fund. If a fund brings a lot of money in, they're going to be able to negotiate extra points of return. So for us, we usually will go for a few points of the GP to protect the investment, because we're not comfortable with that amount of money just staying in the LP position. So we do want a seat at the table, at least as an observer. And we can help out where needed. Like some operators we'll talk to about that will do some certain asset management tasks, or at least consulting, because a lot of us do have experience doing this. And for the people who don't have experience doing it, they're gaining it really fast by sitting in on these asset management meetings and our club meetings. So it's a great way to get into their first deal as a co-GP. So that's kind of how we structure it.
Is it essentially a fund of funds, and all of the members of your club are in the fund?
Like, do you have your own PPM that you guys do amongst yourselves, or is it really just pooling your capital under an LLC?
No, we all go into the deal as separate LPs. So the investment company rules that the SEC set up in the 1940s, you can't start a company for the sole purpose of circumventing the accredited investor standpoint. So it's like, I couldn't put an LLC together with accredited and unaccredited investors in there and then go into a 506C, because that would be circumventing that as a single entity. We'd have to be an accredited entity, which means that either everybody in the company is accredited, which we do for 506Cs, or the entity itself has to have a net worth of at least $5 million. And ours don't, because we create a new entity or new LLC for every deal that we club on. And so we're probably never going to be that accredited entity status. We're also not a fund, because these syndications already have a fund. It's a single offering fund, and they're already set up to accept capital from limited partners. And so it would be mostly just double dipping at that point. If we were to start our own multi-offering or blind fund, might give us a little bit more flexibility, and certainly would give us more control if we're bringing in our own limited partners, but we can still do it in that structure without having to fund ourselves, because as co-GPs, we can raise capital. Now, we can't be on a GP for the sole purpose of raising capital. That's illegal. So we have to have a legitimate reason to be on the GP. And for us, it's protecting our investment, and it is for offering our help and services. We're considered non-managing members. And in that role, we can go out and raise additional capital from limited partners straight into the sponsor's syndication, because they already set it up.
Gotcha. That's interesting. How many people are in your club?
I would say that the legal definition of club is when we actually form an LLC and pool our money and go into a deal.
I see. So it's different for each deal.
Yes, it's different for each deal. So, I mean, technically the SEC says as long as you have less than 100 members, then you're not going to be regulated. But I'm trying to keep it closer to like 10, 15. It would just be like a capital raising business. Like if the three of us decided we wanted to go raise capital, we wouldn't start a fund. We would just be the three of us, and we would go find deals and raise capital together, the three of us, and we'd all split the equity portion that we negotiated for ourselves. It's the same thing. It's just we have more people.
Gotcha. So you're doing your own deals. You're not really finding third-party operators.
No, we are finding third-party operators. It is a capital raising type of pool.
So with those third-party operators, if you have 10 or 15 people that are kind of coming in, are they all on the GP and allowed to join the calls and stuff like that? Or is it just a few of you that decide to, take the sponsors up on attending the asset management calls and things?
We'll always ask for anybody who wants to be able to get onto the calls and have access to the back office systems and documents. But every operator is different. Most of them are fine with it, as long as we don't talk. Like nobody wants a nitty gritty kind of detail oriented person in there in the asset management calls asking us, 20 questions. That's inappropriate. So we just make sure that we have our expectations set up with the operator beforehand. This is what we want, and this is what we're offering. And it's a document that we send them and they sign it.
Cool. Interesting.
That sounds like a nice approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm all about like the prenuptial agreement. There it can be a lot of stress and headaches solved by just having expectations managed from the beginning. I've seen JVs go down because one partner ended up having to put in more money than the others, and now he's asking for more equity, and they're going to part ways and they're fighting and they're going to go to court. And I'm like, well, did you put that on your operating agreement, how capital calls would be handled? And they're like, oh no. So have all of that taken care of on the front end, those expectations managed, documents signed, and you'll just save yourself a lot of headache down the road.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I love about the way that you guys kind of have your thing structured is this ongoing work that you do, which really keeps all of your tools sharp. But not only that, but also really kind of keeps everybody, of the same mind in a lot of ways, right? You know each other's minds in terms of the stuff that you're looking at, what kind of flies, what doesn't fly with certain people and things like that. And
Yep.
it really kind of, it allows you, I think, to kind of self-correct in a lot of ways. Whereas sometimes when you're dealing with possible groups of investors, sometimes you don't have everybody's need. You can't take everybody's needs into consideration when you're trying to put something together.
Yeah,
You know?
it's a lot like herding cats, but I would say going back to some more practical experience. I know we were talking before we started recording of like the origin story and the background of what put us to where we are and the direction that we're moving. And for me, honestly, it was just being a mom of a lot of kids. And my mother-in-law used to tease me a little bit because when we would go to a restaurant, we would get out of the car and everybody would huddle around on the sidewalk, children gather around like some kind of Mary Poppins joke. And I would say, we're going into a restaurant. It's grandma's birthday. How do we act in a restaurant? And they'd be like, we are behaved. It's like, do we throw food? Do we get up? Do we run around? And then I ask them some questions like, what happens if you have to go to the bathroom? What happens if you are bored? And we just chat about it. And it only takes like 45, 60 seconds. And everybody is marching in, the ducklings in a row on the same page. And we know what's going on. And then we can go have a nice dinner at a restaurant without me getting angry and threatening to bring people home every 5 minutes. Those upfront expectations come from just survival in life, and people can't manage parenthood. They can't manage their marriages. They can't handle their siblings' relationships. Just look back to it. What is it that you want out of this relationship? Are you both on the same page? Like, I want a very, very deep relationship with some people who really are only interested in me in a surface way. And I have to get real quick with my expectations of what do I want out of this relationship. It's no different in business. The best parenting books and the best business books and the best marriage books, they all talk about the same thing: upfront expectations, mature communication. And that's all it's all about. We run all of these things in the same way. And so if you can stop looking at these things as separate things, and you can draw on all of your skills. I mean, who would have thought that being a homeschool mom of a bunch of kids would come in and help me build better partnerships in business and build better JVs and better legal structures? Of course it does.
Love it. Love it. And, we talked a little bit earlier about you've been kind of exploring and maybe doing a little bit more of being a key principal on non-recourse loans. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'll be the key principal or the loan guarantor on deals, on my own deals that I sponsor.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to start doing more of that for other people's deals. And so the goal that we had last year was to work on our liquidity and to work on our net worth, so that we could sign on stuff. And I think we're at the point where we could probably sign on some smaller, like 10 unit, 20 unit types of deals for the liquidity, so that we were talking about this before, why we chose not to 1031 the profits from the deal that we sold in December is because I wanted to put it into more liquid forms and hang on to it for one, an emergency fund, and two, to be able to have that 10% of my net worth as liquid accessible assets so that I can sign on loans. So we did sign on our first agency loan, a Freddie Mac, on a refinance that we just did. And normally you have to have someone on the team who's already signed on one of those loans. And so I feel like that allows me to just be a little bit more useful when I'm putting myself out there as a key partner. And they allowed us to do it on that because it was a property we already owned and we'd already been running it, and it was a refinance. And so we were able to do that and get that resume thing under our belt. So I think it's more passive for sure than sponsoring deals. I don't plan on sponsoring a lot more deals. I'll either do deals through the club as a co-GP, a KP, which would be a co-GP, capital raiser, consultant, or just a limited partner. I'm definitely looking to build more cash flow in a more passive way.
That's great.
Interesting.
Yeah, I actually know quite a few people that have built out a very nice kind of side business by KPing on those types of deals for lots of units. Like they built up a very strong, and they really don't. I mean, it depends on the lender, but they don't really contribute cash to the deals. It's all using their net worth and showing their liquidity, and they take a piece of the GP for that, the general partnership. But it helps. There's two things though, which is really, really great, right? For the KP who's growing their net worth or everything, it's very interesting to take that path because you're getting K1s, which are the all important K1s at the end of the year, right? Stack your K1s, as they say.
I call it a K1 business when I talk to my accountant, because
the more K1s you have, the better.
I was like, right now I have a Schedule E business, but I'm working on getting a K1 business.
But it also, we talked about, being able to partner up with people who raise capital, but also to exponentially grow your real estate business. It can be very helpful to have these key principals signing on bigger loans for you, because that can help you exponentially grow your portfolio sizes, your per deal size, in a big way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's important for that KP to actually have the experience they need to step in and take the deal over. I say never, ever, ever accept that the only experienced person on a deal is the KP, because they're not really doing anything. They don't even have their own money in it. So if that KP is not prepared to step in early, and again, this should be written down, there should be certain thresholds where that KP can come in and take over the asset management. If the DSCR gets too low, or these other types of benchmarks that they're set, and the KP is able and willing to keep an eye on that and step in as needed. I would say it's better to have an asset manager on the deal who is experienced and has done this before. But if the only person on there who has experience in the KP, that's not necessarily a deal killer, but it's a massive red flag.
Well, and there's got to be some parity, right? So like I personally wouldn't recommend KPing on deals with newer sponsors unless you really, really trusted that they could pull off the business plan. So there's got to be some measure of working with the level of experience that you're comfortable working with, because just because might be a non-recourse loan, you still have some things that you actually have to sign a guarantee on. The carve outs aren't a total carve out.
Yeah. Well, and plus if you end up losing that property, let's say you sign on a Fannie loan,
it's a career killer.
The deal goes bad, you're not going to be a KP on the next
loan. Well, and before that, like to your point, Emma, before that, the Fannie or Freddie, they're going to come after you as the KP, like, hey, that liquidity that you showed us, let's, we got to put it into place because you're going to have to save the deal.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. The KP needs to be willing and able to step in early if things are not going well. And I would say on a certain state, if the KP can do anything else, for example, help raise capital, and then consult. So I would say if I'm in a consulting role really early on, and I can bring all of the systems that we've developed, and also the systems that, let's just call it what is that we stole from the third-party operators that we're clubbing up with, we again, in that document that we sign, have certain requirements of how we're going to use the documents and the systems that we're having access to by doing business with them. And some of them are like, feel free, go make your own business successful with them. And others that are more proprietary. So we definitely have to make sure that we ask permission. So it's not technically stealing, but we are having access to a much wider array of systems, documents, and just ways of running these things, and getting lots of ideas and saying, oh yeah, no, here's how we do it, but they're doing it better, or vice versa. If we can say, hey, I'm just a non-managing member, but can I make a suggestion here? Here's how we handle this on another deal. That as a KP should be able to come in and put those systems into a more inexperienced group and say, here's how we're going to run this thing. I'm very, very good at designing this and delegating. What I'm really not good at is the follow-up. So I do not want to work with people who need a lot of babysitting, but I'm happy to work with people who just need pointed in the right direction.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, I think a big lesson here is if you're going to KP, there's certainly financial upside, but you really have to know who you're getting in bed with, and you really have to vet them and be comfortable that they can run the show, that they could, effectively asset manage.
Yeah.
I think it gets thrown around a lot, like, oh, I'm a KP and blah, 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 blah. And they just are racking them up, and it's not passive. I will say that it is much more passive than being a deal sponsor. It's more like a board position than it is like an active manager, but it's certainly not mailbox money. It's not set it and forget it. And I think that if a KP goes into it with the attitude that they're never going to look at it again and just collect their mailbox money, that's another red flag. Ask, just if you're going to be a limited partner, or if you're going to partner up with a KP, ask them, what are you planning on bringing to this deal other than signing on the line? They require the KP to have experience for a reason. It's not just so we can get the line signed. It's because we might need to step in and take over.
Those are good points.
Absolutely.
Those are really good points. So, okay. So throughout all of this, like, I think I have my ideas, but what would you say are your superpowers right now?
The herding cats, for sure. I've been saying that a lot lately, just because getting everybody with diverse backgrounds and needs together, moving in the same direction, is something that I feel like I'm good at, and I can work with a wide variety of people. Again, because the communication and the upfront expectations are set. And I always have a tendency to feel really guilty after I partner up with people, because I really do want to step back a little bit more and let other people do their job. But I still feel so guilty about it. And so I've been much more clear on my last couple of deals about exactly what I am going to do after this thing closes. I'm going to set up systems, and then I'm going to monitor, and then I'm going to take a more of a backseat role. And that's actually worked out pretty well, because nobody's expecting something different.
Yeah.
So I think that herding the cats, getting things set up, is where I am at my best, like somewhere between putting a deal under contract and mid stabilization is really where I do my best work. And then I move on to the next one. I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow. This has been great. This has been fantastic, Emma. Thank you so much. So if anybody wanted to kind of get in touch with you, how could they reach out? Are you on Instagram, your website?
Yeah. So if you go to highrise.group/contact, it has all my social links are on there. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And I've also got my phone number if you want to send me a text or something. And then my email address, obviously my email is like a black hole. So like a LinkedIn message or a Facebook message, if you want to talk directly, or text message are the best way to get a hold of me. But like I said, it's all there on that highrise.group website/contact.
Cool.
And you can even set up a calendar, like my Calendly is on there too. And you can just set up a 30-minute consultation, whether you're an active investor, you want to be a limited partner, or you're a beginner, or what, you just have some questions about the club. That's one of the things I do a lot, is 30-minute consultations. I like them. That's one of the fun parts of my job.
That's fantastic. Great stuff. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma. This has been terrific. Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate you having me on and letting me geek out about debt service coverage.
I love it.
Love it.
Bye. 10X for Gen XYZ is hosted by Zach Winter and Markader Rios, co-founders of Prosperity CRE, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and building long-term wealth. If you like the podcast, please give us a positive rating and subscribe to be notified about future content. Also, if you'd like to learn more about our approach to real estate investing, you can download a free copy of our real estate investment book, Investing for Cash Flow and Long-Term Wealth, by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thank you, and stay tuned for our upcoming episodes.